Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. The other day I made a video talking about the weight of slides on guns and how they recoil and how they feel in the hand when you're shooting the guns based off the weight of the slide. And of course there was a lot of different opinions, there was a lot of comments, and I was very thankful for the interaction we had on that video. It actually had a lot of views, and it's actually a really simple video to make, and I think some of the best videos. And what a lot of YouTubers are looking for in some cases is more information and education on firearms, as far as, you know, what to buy, you know, what makes this work this way, and just information that is beneficial to them as a shooter, as somebody that's wanting to learn more about weapons and guns. And so I want to try to make more videos like this, because you can find a million different reviews on almost any gun pretty much out there, unless it's a really special, rare gun. But as far as information, it's harder to find channels that actually share really valuable and in-depth information. But I made that video talking about slide weights, like how a lightweight slide feels compared to a heavyweight slide. We had some 1911s on the table. We were talking about that, and I talked about my preference, and also said that your preference might not be mine, but go out there and try it, and go out there and see what you might like over the other, and see if you can kind of find that sweet spot and balance for you. And a lot of people mention in that video spring weights. So I heard a lot on spring weights in that video. Like, basically it almost sounded like some people, I know some of them didn't say it this way, but some people almost sounded like you could change the spring weight in a slide and make a light slide feel heavier, or make a heavier slide feel lighter. And that's just not necessarily true. To an extent, we can definitely tune our guns and help them out with making the spring weight balanced for what load we are shooting. But there is some pros and cons to that, and there definitely is some ways that we can overdo those changes to our weapons, and we can actually do more harm than good in some cases. And one thing I do want to mention, just in case, I know some of you guys, or most of you guys, will probably know, but like in a slide this size, this is a Hellcat. It's pretty much got a 3-inch slide as far as the barrel. It does have a threaded barrel, so it's a longer barrel than that, but it pretty much has a 3-inch slide that accommodates a 3-inch barrel. And you have to have a heavier spring, just to go straight into it. You got to have a heavier spring, because the weight of this slide is not able to disperse the energy that's being interjected into that slide as much as a heavier slide like this. So that being said, you can only go so far with spring changes, and it's why I would recommend in most cases not exceeding plus or minus 3 pounds from the factory stock spring, and make sure you're basing that off the loads that you're shooting. Okay guys, so it's very important that if we do make changes to our springs for our guns, we are making them with while we're analyzing the data of what load we're actually shooting, how much power factor are we getting out of the load we're shooting. So you don't want to shoot plus P plus and lighten the spring by 2 pounds. It's just something you don't want to do. You don't want to shoot plus P plus and probably lighten the spring weight at all on any kind of gun that has a factory spring. If anything, you would want to shoot plus P plus out of a gun that's been sprung a little bit heavy, right guys? So just giving those kind of thoughts, because I know some people, the way they mentioned in the last video, they almost act like you could make a heavy slide feel like a light slide and a light slide feel like a heavy slide just by changing the springs, and that's not always the case. And we could go into several things. I do want to mention in some part of this video, to a certain extent, that I actually prefer in most cases. You know, they make dual spring recoil systems, they make triple spring recoil systems, they might even make quad spring recoil systems for all I know, but I've only seen the dual and triple systems. But in most cases, for most platforms, I actually prefer just the single spring recoil system. If you pick the right spring, in most cases I feel like the less parts, the more reliable a gun will be. And if you pick a single spring system that fits the load you're shooting, in most cases I've experienced that the gun does cycle smoother with a single spring, it tends to, just when you're racking the slide by hand, it just feels like a smoother and experience, and that kind of gives me the thought that maybe the gun could be slightly more reliable. There's less places for debris and stuff to get in this spring system than, say, a triple spring system. And the less parts you put in a gun, the less parts that can break. So I kind of like that idea as well. You can also see any kind of debris in this spring system, whereas if you have a triple spring system, it's got a guide rod inside of a guide rod, basically moving back and forth with several springs, and some of the springs you can see and some of the springs are not exposed. It's just not really my preference. Can you get slightly better recoil feel out of the dual spring systems? Sometimes, maybe a little, but I sometimes think, especially if you're spending a lot of money on them, I sometimes think they're not really worth what you pay for. Now, that being said, some people may go from a stock setup to one of those expensive adjustable triple spring, dual spring systems that cost a lot of money and say, wow, this feels better. But most of those people never just tried to, tune the spring on the single system to get it to where it kind of matches their load, and it probably would have done close to the same thing. But I'm not dishing those systems. They do have their advantages, and in certain cases they may feel like they cause the gun to feel a little softer in the hand when in recoil and when shooting the gun. But I just think in most cases you can do just as much with a single spring system, and I feel like it should be a little more reliable in the long run and a little bit easier to tune and maintain and to clean and things like that. And I think that's important. So we don't want to go too far into that. I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to cover with this thought. Like I said, you do not want to, in almost every case, you do not want to change the poundage of a spring in a gun more than 3 pounds in either direction. And that's due to the engineers that built these guns know exactly how much energy the weight of their slides absorb, and how much energy is going to be put into that spring, and how much energy that slide is going to put into the frame itself as it reciprocates. And when you change it more than 3 pounds, you're probably narrowing the life cycle, shortening the life cycle of that gun. And I think it's just not a very smart thing to do. You definitely don't want to take a gun like this and put a 10-pound recoil spring in it. Whereas in some cases you could get a gun like this that low with a really light power factor ammo. But you would never want to do that with this gun being that light of a slide. Now, also let's talk about ports and comps here. The ports and the comps will also cause you to be able to lighten the spring a little bit further than what you can do with a standard barrel. So that's another thought. So I think if you have a gun that is ported, especially ported, kind of heavily ported, I should say, or heavily comped, you can definitely take an extra 2 pounds off that stock spring and even adjust maybe 3 pounds from there. Depending, right, guys? And let's go into this, talking about that. The best way, but it's not always 100% accurate, but the best way to see if you've sprung a gun correctly, in most cases, it depends on the ejector and the extractor and how they are made, how the gun is made. But in most cases in semi-autos like this, if you see that the brass, when you're shooting your specific load that you like to shoot, when you see the brass is not going any further, not being ejected any further than a foot from your gun, you could probably go down in spring weight. You probably should go down in spring weight. If you see that the brass is being extracted further than 6 feet, 5-6 feet from the gun, you probably should go up in spring weight. So that's the best way to, in my opinion, to tune the spring weight to fit your load in your gun in most cases. Like I said, based off the design of the pistol, that could be different and that could change, because not all extractors and ejectors and cycling of different semi-autos are the same. So understand your platform, understand what you probably should be seeing and what you are seeing, you're always going to see a little bit further extraction with a lighter gun like this. And that's one reason why you don't want to go down in spring weight, because you're usually going to see about the max distance of extraction on a gun like this. Whereas on a gun like this, you may see a foot or two extraction, and you might be able to change it to a heavier spring or a lighter spring because you're right there in the middle. Of 2 or 3 foot ejection, you might could go down in spring weight, you might could go up in spring weight. But if you are seeing a gun where the shells are barely falling out of the gun, you know that you need to go down in spring weight. If you see a gun that the bullets are flying more than 10 feet to the right out of the gun, ejecting out of the gun, then you know that you probably need to go up in spring weight. Have any questions, please like and subscribe. Please leave comments below. Appreciate all the support on the last video we made. Like I said, please leave comments below. Please interact. Please let me know what you think of the video. God bless. Have a great day.